And yes, we are live. I'm here with my new friend Troy. How you doing, Troy?
I'm good. I'm good, brother. I love. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it took us a while
Yeah,
to coordinate the schedules and everything. You're way
yeah,
down in Trinidad. I'm up in Canada, so but we figured
yeah,
it out.
yeah,
We figured it out.
yeah, definitely.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. I met you on Podmatch. I'm meeting a lot of cool people on Podmatch. But
Yeah.
before we get into what you're up to today, I'd like you to go back to the very beginning, your childhood. How were you raised? Was there any like faith, philosophy, any worldview that shaped your upbringing? And how did you find your own unique path to where you are today? Just paint a picture of your journey.
Wow. Way back then. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
So I was. I always say I can't. Funny enough, I can't remember too much detail of my childhood. I remember. I definitely remember my influences very much so. And when asked about my upbringing in childhood, David, I just finished writing a book for the last 4 years, and this isn't a plug, but what that allowed me to do is really excavate my own ideology and opinions. And where did that come from? Where did that influence come from? Where did that conditioning come from? Um, and I realized that one of the major things that shaped who I am today is what I refer to as the privilege of love and security. And normally, when we talk about privilege, we talk about things like skin color, race, financial status, opportunity, sexual orientation, all this kind of stuff. And all of that is valid. But I think one of the biggest privileges and advantages that any individual has can have is that environment and that supporting system of love and security, of belonging. And I think that really shapes an individual. That I think had a massive influence on shaping who I am today. The other things that had a big influence is I grew up in a Catholic home.
Oh,
And yeah, I was very always felt very close to God. Always, and Christ especially, as a individual and what he brought to the table and what he offered. But at the same time, I questioned a lot of what I was told because it just didn't make sense. So I am as I am today. I relate a lot more to the teachings of Christ and Jesus as being that of unconditional love and inclusivity outside of what might be boxed as organized religion. And what also had a massive influence on my life, I've come to realize, is the influence of Rastafarian and reggae culture.
oh, oh,
Massive influence on my
oh.
life. And I think that allowed me. Now, when people say that, a lot of people look at me and my whole life, I've been labeled as a herb smoker or. Yeah, yeah, but I actually don't. I actually don't.
You eat
So
it. You eat it, right? You eat it.
neither.
Ah.
So it's very. I like to be clear that my influence of reggae and Rastafarian culture was aside from that. That
But you
had
like the
nothing to
music. You
do
like the
with it.
music.
Music, the lyrics,
Yeah,
the ideology,
yeah,
the revolution, the rebellion,
yeah.
the drive to understand love and see beyond all of that. And in a lot of ways, I believe that Rastafarian culture has kind of got lost a little bit,
Okay.
in my opinion, and moved away from that stuff. We all get caught up in this idea of identity and making someone else wrong or something else wrong and making ourselves right. But without going into that, that also had a big influence in my life in a way that it allowed me to connect to and see a reality outside of my bubble, a reality that existed for individuals outside of my own little bubble of security and privilege. And I guess I went to university at 17. I graduated from university in
Wow.
Florida at 21.
Okay.
I opened Trinidad's first hemp store,
Oh.
which I ran for about 10 years. And I, again, like to be clear, this was a hemp shop, not a head shop. So
Yeah, yeah.
I was an advocate for the environmental use of cannabis sativa and hemp and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, I started teaching yoga a little bit. I opened a recycling business. I closed the hemp shop after 10 years, opened a recycling business where we collected and recycled waste cooking oil, exported to Europe for biofuel. Then I opened a yoga studio, yoga community, and I've just finished writing my first book, which we
Mm.
released just 2 months ago. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. Just briefly, if you don't mind, how many
Yeah,
siblings do you have, brothers and sisters, biological
yeah.
brothers and sisters?
I have two older brothers. I'm the last of three brothers, and I came 7 years after.
Oh, baby.
So in a lot of ways, I kind of grew up on my own, and I think my brothers really cleared a path for me, so that when I came, I had a certain element of freedom. And even though my perspectives and approach to the world is still very different from my family,
Are they mostly
but
Catholic, your family today?
yeah, yeah, all Catholic, all
Oh,
Catholic.
oh,
I wouldn't say active Catholic,
okay, okay.
but all
Culturally.
all Catholic. Yeah, yeah. And I think I was just given that freedom, even though my views and perspective and approach to the world are very different. There was never that judgment. There was never that seclusion.
Yeah.
Um, sometimes, yeah, naturally it could feel a little lonely when you don't, but it never felt like you
Exclusion.
know,
Exclusion.
yeah, exclusion. Yeah.
What's your ethnic background?
My dad's family is Arab from
Ah, I
Syria.
see that. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and recently, about 2 years ago, when we have all this stuff going on in Palestine
Yeah.
and Gaza now, and I know a few years ago it acted up a little bit, and we were watching the news. He loves to watch the news for whatever reason. So both my parents are still alive, and my dad's 85, and he was watching the news. So I was sat with him to watch the news, and he looked at me and he's like, we're originally from Palestine. I was like, what? I was like, I thought we were from Syria. And he's like, yeah, but the brothers moved from Palestine to Syria, to this
Mm,
village in Syria, where my whole life I've been told where our family originated from, right?
uh-huh.
But of course, there's always well, what happened before that? What happened?
Yeah.
Where were you before that? I believe even our idea of ancestry is somewhat skewed because that stops at one point in the timeline of history.
Yeah.
And we have to ask the question, well, what about before that? And if we keep going back, we realize that our ancestry, all of us, is spirit. That's where we all came from. So why not go back there and identify with that rather than identify with something else? But I'm going off on a tangent. So to answer your question, my dad's lineage is Arab, and my mom's lineage is Irish
Oh,
European.
no way.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, was your dad's family traditionally Christian and Catholic going back generations?
Yeah, they were. And what's funny is they actually when Arabs from Lebanon and Syria came to the West, of course they settled in communities because they probably couldn't speak English very well or whatever it was. And after my dad's generation, it was probably normal practice for Arabs to marry within a community or within their family and within that. So it became kind of cliquish. And my dad, I think, was one of the first that married outside of that.
Ah,
So
ah,
and I'm so grateful that he did because my mom is such a beautiful woman, both my parents, but I
nice.
would not choose any other mother, you know.
Nice. What about,
Yeah.
speaking of choosing beautiful women, I'm sure you've had many women, but are you settled down and married, or what's the situation with your love life?
No, no, I'm single. I just recently came out a 6 month relationship, a short one, but I am definitely
Single.
single, bachelor at 43, no kids.
Okay.
But I have been madly in love with a lot of beautiful women, a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
amazing, beautiful women that I cherish daily.
Yeah.
Most of which, or if not all of which, are still very active in my life today.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you're
Yeah.
very, very handsome, so you must get a lot of ladies.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I can't take credit for that,
What
but
about your brothers? Are your
yeah.
brothers handsome too?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Isn't everyone, David?
No.
Isn't everyone?
No.
No. But yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. My brothers both. One of my brothers is married with two kids,
okay.
and my other brother is also my oldest brother. He's 10 years older than me. He's very much a bachelor and
Okay.
doesn't really believe in relationship or marriage.
Oh, oh yeah.
He's just very much a bachelor, loves to
Oh,
drink and hang out,
oh,
and
uh-oh.
yeah,
Uh-oh.
yeah.
Any redheads? Are you any of your brothers got any Irish red hair?
My nephew does.
Oh
So
yeah.
my mom's dad was a redhead. I didn't really know him very well. He died when I was one. But so my nephew is red, 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 red.
Wow. So
Yeah,
do you know the the acro yoga here in Montreal? We have like
yeah,
acrobatic yoga and these sorts
yeah,
of
yeah,
things. You know the
yeah.
whole scene
Yeah,
of
I actually came, when I was a young teacher, like within the first year or two of teaching. I've been teaching now for over 15 years. And along your journey, you dabble with different approaches to yoga. And when I was in my very early stages of teaching, I actually came to Montreal and I studied with Jessine and Eugene Poku, who
yeah,
I believe they
yeah,
also have Ashtanga Yoga Montreal. So
yeah.
I actually did a acro yoga training with them.
Ah,
And
ah,
even, that was when I got one of my biggest compliments as a teacher, even
ah.
within my first year or two of teaching. And you go out and you teach in front of class or whatever when you're doing a teacher training. And I think it was Eugene. Of course, they give you criticism and feedback, and he looked at me and he said, "I would do choice class any day.
Mm,
Any day, I would come back and do this class by choice." And that was a massive compliment for me. But I think he also understood. He saw before I recognized it that acro yoga wasn't really my thing.
ah, ah.
And during that training, I would go to him and be like, Eugene, is it okay if I just like go in the next room and practice yoga? Because I really didn't connect too much to acro
Mm,
yoga.
mm-hmm.
Not to take anything away from it. I was just a lot more focused on the depth of practice of relationship to breath and mind and spirit that came through, an individual's journey in their own practice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know Eugene actually worked from a little bit on the website and the database and stuff like that. And I know
yeah.
his brother. I knew his brother first, Joe. I don't know if you know Joe Poku,
No,
but
no.
he's a devout Catholic and a nice guy. And yeah, I'm happy to have
Look
some
at
sort of
that.
connection with you. I'm happy to have
Yeah.
a
You
Montreal connection.
see how small this world is?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It's nice. My friend, I've got a friend who does contact dance, and it's all about movement and that
yeah.
communication and stuff like that. Have you ever seen that, or have you ever done that sort of thing?
No, dance and performance really isn't too much of my thing. I know I was never really introduced to it.
Ah, okay.
There's quite a bit of that in Trinidad, and I know there's definitely a lot of that in Montreal, and it is a beautiful art form for me, but it's never something I got into myself.
And you never did theater?
No,
Okay.
no.
What about music?
That
Did you perform music?
No, but my brother, it's so funny. My brother's one of the most amazing vocalists and
Oh,
musicians I know.
oh, oh.
And I remember this is my second brother. He's the middle one. And I also always used to follow him around as a kid. And he no longer plays music, unfortunately, or hasn't in a while. But musicians, I come from a family of musicians. My uncle was an amazing musician. There are a lot of musicians within my extended family. And, you know, when we consider the conditioning or the narratives we are offered as kids. When I was a child in school and I went to choir, I remember being told I couldn't sing, and I was actually kicked out of the
Ooh,
choir.
ooh,
I was actually kicked out of the choir. So while my class went to choir, I had to find something else to do with my
uh,
time.
uh,
And of course, that's a narrative that I carried since then. Since then.
uh, uh,
So even though I love music and I love writing of music and powerful music, and I admire all these musicians in my life, friends and family, I'm gonna see one tonight actually, but it's just never something that I step into, probably because of that narrative and conditioning.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Have you dug deep into the history of Rastafarianism and Haile Selassie and Ethiopian Orthodox Church and these sorts of things? Have you? Because there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and
yeah,
some people believe. I've even met Catholics who believe that the Ark of the Covenant from the Old Testament is in Ethiopia today.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a lot happening in Ethiopia and in the Orthodox Church and even in the Catholic
yeah.
Church. Have you looked into that at all? Are you interested in that?
Yes, I would say I'm familiar,
Yeah,
of course, because I've been such influenced by Rastafarianism since I was 6 years old. So I definitely have dabbled and read, but I would hesitate to say that I'm some kind of scholar on the
yeah, yeah. Of course,
context.
of course, of course.
But I am familiar, yes, and for me, David, it's like I my approach and perspective to God that I really gravitate to is one that is inclusive
It's open, open.
or completely open. And
You
I
have an
believe,
open relationship with God. You're in an open
yeah,
relationship with
and
God.
more so, I believe that every individual deserves the right to define their own unique relationship to God. Because I look at the world today, and I even have so much friends and see so much people who move away from God
Yeah,
completely
yeah, yeah,
because of the misalignment that has been brought historically in the name of God. And even for believers in religion and context, we must acknowledge that, because if we don't acknowledge that, we can't correct the misalignment that has been done.
yeah,
So in that, what I offer individuals, I've even have conversations with people, and they start by saying, "I'm an atheist," and through conversation, I eventually allow them to recognize that, well, they do believe in some higher consciousness or energy or something. I was like, well, then you believe in God. You could call it what you want. But I think it's so important to make that idea of a divine agency more accessible to people.
yeah,
And so that's what, for me, I like to believe that I invite people to do.
yeah,
Um, so while I'm in no way opposed to any religious context and understanding of God, my approach to it is to invite people that to understand that they have the right to define their own relationship to God and to nurture that relationship. Because I've also come to describe it this way. It's like, for so many generations, people have been told of God. They've been told what God is, what God looks like, and what God wants of them. But it's like a fruit. I can describe to you a taste of a fruit, but you can't know what that tastes like
mm.
unless you taste it yourself.
Do you have fruit in Trinidad that I've never tasted? Possibly
I'm sure, maybe, I don't know. We
some
have
exotic fruits. What do you have there?
um we have, I don't know if châtaigne would be a fruit. We
Chate.
have, one of my favorite is kaimet
Okay,
and kushuma.
never tried it.
Yeah, kushuma,
What's it taste like?
kaimet.
What's it taste like?
It's a
Sweet,
white,
juicy.
yeah, sweet, 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 very sweet and fleshy.
Uh,
It's like a light, fleshy coconut jelly surrounds all these tiny little seeds.
oh, lychee. Oh,
So
lychee fruit. Lychee fruit.
maybe,
Is it
maybe,
small like that?
no, if fruit is about this big.
Oh,
And
okay.
when you crack it open,
Yeah.
it's like 100 little black seeds, each one
Oh,
surrounded with this white, fleshy
okay.
meat.
Oh, okay.
So you would then scoop it out and put it in your mouth, and you suck off your flesh and spit out
Oh,
the seeds, and
okay.
then throw it in your garden and hope it grows. Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay,
yeah,
okay. Yeah, but when it comes to the personal relationship with God, I'm just wondering, you were raised sort of loosely Catholic Christian.
yeah,
Did you reject the Trinity, that there's Father, Son, Holy Spirit in the Godhead, one God, but with three
yeah.
persons? Have you rejected that, or do you still
No,
somehow accept that's true?
no, I wouldn't reject anything. I don't think I would reject any perspective of God or approach to God, and definitely not that, right? I have been influenced by a Catholic perspective on God, much of which I still connect to. I mean, I do believe there's a God that lives in every individual, and of course I've been highly influenced by perspective of yoga now as well. I've been practicing and teaching for a long time, and through that I've come to understand and consider that we see individuals and we see someone's actions, words, and thoughts, but the actions, words, and thoughts, that's just really their conditioning. That's really decided by their experiences and their environment, and how they've been conditioned in their life. So I might look at someone and I might not be aligned with their conditioning. I might be opposed to their conditioning. But beyond that conditioning, can I still recognize that God lives there?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
there's a spark and seed of God within every living being. And if we can begin to relate to one another and see that element of God in them and see past their conditioning, then, the words I use in my book is that forgiveness is no longer an option, it's inevitable. It becomes inevitable. There might be healing that needs to happen before forgiveness happens, but it's no longer optional. If we can see past someone's actions, words, and deeds, then forgiveness is an absolute must.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just a real quick question. Do you believe in
yeah.
reincarnation? Because I just met a Catholic who believes in reincarnation, but we're not allowed to believe that as Catholics if you're strictly within the
Oh,
church. But what do you think?
okay. I'm gonna run off. I'm gonna take you with me one moment because I have a
Okay.
book here that is so. Hopefully, I can. Oh yeah, yeah. I have an. I do believe in reincarnation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But funny enough, I have this book that I haven't yet dived into, and
Oh.
it said reincarnation, the missing link in Christianity.
Oh. Okay.
And it talks about the fact that
Who's the author on
reincarnation.
that?
The author is Elizabeth Clare Prophet,
Okay. Okay.
and it talks about the reality that, well, I say a reality, but it proposes the consideration that reincarnation was actually embedded in Christian faith and belief, and it was removed. It was lost, but it was a part of the original Christian belief and understanding of life, that reincarnation was very much a part of that. And it's so interesting for me. I don't want to speak too much on it yet because I haven't read the book. But I do connect to, some element of reincarnation or life after death. I do not relate too much, David, to the understanding of heaven and hell as
Uh-huh.
as
Uh-huh.
as
Uh-huh.
as
That was my
many
next
organizations.
question. That was my
Yeah,
next
yeah,
question. Yeah.
yeah.
They're always connected,
Um,
reincarnation. If people accept reincarnation, they reject an eternal hell. Uh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I think from a really young age, that was one of my biggest struggles.
Yeah.
That was one of my biggest struggles, is that, and again, I want to be clear. I don't condemn any perspective or approach, or like everyone has the right to see it how they see it. For me, I had a really hard time um, a hard struggle with the concept of God loves me unconditionally, but if I don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm gonna be punished in eternity for hell. Well, to me, one, that's not unconditional love. And I also offer this, and I offer this in my book, that it's very much a fair driven offering to me. It's like do X, Y, and Z so that you don't go to hell. And at least the way it was delivered for me, it's like that we should fear God, right? And I prefer a relationship to God in which my God wants to be loved and not feared, and that God would prefer that I do these things that are in alignment with Him because I recognize that He lives in all of creation, and I dedicate my life to being in service to that. That I don't live my life in a certain way out of fear of judgment, because if I did that, that would still be a selfish love, because I would be trying to serve Him out of fear of punishment.
Yeah.
And for me, that's not just something, that's not an approach that feels right, you know?
Yeah, that's the Christian teaching, is that it's, in between despair and
Yeah,
presumption, there's love, and that's where we have to be as Christians. But we are also a work in progress, and we have the baggage, like you said, we have the
yeah,
conditioning, and our
yeah,
thoughts, words, and deeds are conditioned. And so we're all struggling to find that place of love. And that's where the freedom is, because God
yeah,
is freedom, and Christ is God. And so therefore Christ is freedom. And so
yeah,
that's the Christian message, to live in Christ, to die to self. So we have to get rid of
yeah,
our selfish inclinations. And St. Paul talks about that, how difficult it is, because there's a law in the flesh. Like when you're hungry, you want the food. It's just natural. And
yeah, yeah,
a lot of that is good, but there's an attachment that we have, and this is something that the Eastern religions and philosophies emphasize:
yeah,
detaching from our dependencies, addictions to air and food and water and sleep and everything else. And there's
yeah,
the Christian worldview shares a lot of those concerns, and it's the same approach. Like we have to love creation because it's good, but we can't put the creation above the creator. So
yeah,
there's a lot of overlap that we have, in Christianity and Islam, Judaism, and even the religions and philosophies of the East, and with you yourself,
yeah,
with your worldview that you've cobbled together. And so it's I like to emphasize the common ground, and
yeah, of course.
there's a lot.
Yeah, there's so much, and I think one of the problems in our world right now, David, is that, it's this idea of identity.
Yeah,
And we're identifying with all that makes us different and separate. And we're not identifying with what makes us the same. And I talk about this story once, but it's so beautiful for me, but I try to make it really, really precise and quick. But there's an Indian saint called Neem Karoli Baba, and he was Steve Jobs' guru. I don't know if you heard of Ram Das, Krishna
yeah,
Das.
yeah.
That was their guru as well. And but he never really taught anything much.
Mm,
Just sitting with him in his presence,
mm,
you would feel God, right? He never gave any yoga practices, any breathing practices, any rituals, nothing. Um, and they would always ask him, "Give us something to do. Tell us what to do so we can find God." He would say, "Well, love people, serve people, feed people, tell the truth, remember God. What more do you want to do?" And one day they came to him and they asked him for something to do. And he said, "Meditate like Christ. You want to find God? Meditate like Christ." So they ran off really excited that he actually gave them something to do. And then they sit down and they're like, "Well, how does Christ meditate?" So then they come back to him and they say, "Baba, Baba," which means teacher. They say, "Baba, Baba, tell us, you said meditate like Christ, but how did Christ meditate?" And his story goes that he paused and tears began to run down his face. And he said, "Christ lost himself in love." That's how he meditated. He lost himself in love. And I think there's so much power in that, David, because we live in a world where we identify with this body and this name. We're born into this body. We're told, I am Troy. And as we go along our lives, we attach to these aspects of our identity that revolve around this body. But that makes us separate. And I remember reading once that one of the most powerful things that Christ came to teach us is that we are not our bodies, that we are not our bodies. And if we begin to identify with something beyond our body, with a sameness, and the word spirit, Holy Spirit, the word spirit comes from the Latin word spiritus. It means to breathe. It's the one thing that we share, this spirit, this breath. And I believe that we have to understand this identity that you're pointing to, all these layers of our identity. Because if we don't cultivate a relationship to it, it's going to unconsciously manipulate us and create these layers of attachment and make us separate. And unconsciously, our lives are going to be driven by the need to preserve this sense of identity and defend this sense of identity. And I think very much so that's even what's happening now in Palestine, Gaza. You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
I-
So have you traveled a lot to different continents and countries and seen different cultures and religions and ways of life?
Yeah.
And how has that informed your sort of worldview in terms of, the traps, the common traps that we fall into with
Yeah.
identity politics and with getting stuck in things that aren't necessarily at the core of the person. How
Yeah.
has traveling
Yeah.
helped with that?
Yeah. There's an amazing quote that said, privilege is blind to those that have it.
Uh,
And I think that we all are privileged in some way. Privilege is advantage. And we all have certain advantages and privileges that others don't have, right? We all do. And I think traveling, of course, for me, I was 21, my last semester at university, I got to travel the world on a ship
oh.
for 5 months. And
Mm,
it was called Semester at Sea. And while we were at sea, we had class. And
okay.
while we docked in a country, we had a week where we just went.
Mm,
And I think that opened up my eyes to so much consideration. And up until that point, all I wanted to do was travel. And funny enough, after I did that, I still love traveling, of course. But after I did that and came back home, it was more like, okay, it's time to ground because I have work to do. Because now I now have a sense of purpose that has been put into perspective, that I don't want to just backpack the world anymore and travel because that might be cool and fun and happy. But for me, I felt like I needed that sense of purpose where I could actually make a difference in the world. And I think to do that, for some of us, not all of us, everybody had their own path. For me, it was growing some roots here to try to have some influence. So I definitely think traveling has a massive impact. But even so, David, somebody needs to be introspective in whatever food they take in. Traveling could be food, it could be reading books, it could be watching documentaries, it could be listening to podcasts. You don't have to travel to come to these realizations, but you have to ask the right questions. And I think even for a lot of people who travel the world a lot, they don't ask the right questions. A lot of people do a lot of reading. They don't ask the right questions. And I think no matter what element of food someone takes in, it's all food, energetic food, spiritual food, literature, travel. Somebody needs to ask the question, how does this apply to my life? How does this give me consideration to be a better human being, to serve something bigger than myself? And if someone is not asking that question, they're going to miss it, you
yeah.
know?
A big concern is hunger, access to drinkable water, these sorts of things. It's 2023, And
Yeah,
you would have thought that maybe we would have gotten closer to having some sort of common ground worldwide where people could have justice and education, food, water, and these sorts of things. How do you explain it? I have my Christian worldview, which gives me the story of the fall and the serpent in the garden, Adam and Eve, and the demons and the whole mess, it results from sin. I don't know if you share that part of the story with me, but you have to explain. You have to explain why humans are torturing and killing other humans in 2023. You have to have an explanation for that. And for
yeah,
me, it's sin, and the creature is prone to selfishness because they moved away from God. That's the short answer.
yeah,
But what's
yeah.
your answer? Is it the same answer?
No, it's not. And this is such a relevant question, David. You're hitting things on nail, but to me, this is the ultimate question. This is the ultimate question. Um, and I'll say two things before I answer it. One is that I've come to the understanding that we really don't know anything. We know what we're told, we know what we're fed. We know, due to our conditioning, we have these ideas of what's true and what's not. But if you take a step away from all of that and put yourself in this world, right now I'm in a forest surrounded by nature, which is where I live. I sit here every day and I look out and I'm like, wow, I'm like, what the hell is this? But when you really zoom out, look at our solar system, our planetary alignments, everything. As little human beings, you realize that we really don't know anything. All we know is what we're told. And if we keep asking the right questions, the answers are always, well, how and why? How and why? How and why? How did it happen and why? No matter what, right? To me. But that doesn't make the world more digestible or more acceptable, because if we look at what's happening in the world, like you pointed out, it's like, what the hell is going on? This is not a world I want to live in. What is happening? How do you explain this, right? And I understand that what I'm about to share, someone could say, well, that's such a privileged approach to perspective on the world. And I understand why somebody might say that. I am not trying to remove my responsibility to make a difference in the world. I'm not trying to justify in any way the misalignments of our world. They have to be rectified. They must be addressed. And we have work to do as a collective humanity. But to make the world, to answer your question, to make the world more palatable and make me not want to shoot myself in the head and walk away from it all, this is the perspective I've taken, because I also know that I know nothing. So the only perspective that I've been able to make this more digestible is this. On some level, first of all, if I am not my body, I don't believe I am my body. I believe after my body ceases to exist, I will continue to, on some level, as a level of consciousness, I will continue to exist, as will we all, right? So therefore, I am not my body. My body is just like this t-shirt. I'm going to change it at some point and go into a different form. Therefore, what I experience in this body, all of us, is just momentary. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean it's not painful. It doesn't mean it's a levels of unimaginable suffering. But I believe that on some level, we are spiritual beings that have come to embody this human experience in order to learn, grow, and transform and understand certain things. It's like we've come to school. Each one of us has a curriculum to walk, and we are part of one another's curriculum. My mistakes and flaws, my misalignment might be part of your curriculum, and vice versa, right? I might be here to teach you love and forgiveness and compassion. I might be in your life to teach you how to draw boundaries and discover your own courage. My mistakes and flaws might be there to teach me how to overcome shame and guilt, humanness. But I believe on some level, we're all here to experience a different curriculum and to learn and grow in some way. And I believe that it is all momentary. And while it is very hard to digest and look at, I believe that God and divine agency exist in even the darkest parts of our world. I believe that there is divine intelligence even in our absolute flaws and mistakes, even in what appears as absolute inhumanity. I believe that we're here to work through it together, not separately.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for that. So this is all very familiar to me. I was deep in the New Age before I became a Christian, so I'm aware of the
Yeah,
sort of the New Age ideas, and a lot of my guests, especially recently because of Podmatch,
yeah,
are deep in the New Age. And my recent guest yesterday, he said what a lot of New Age people say, which is that all is one, separation is illusion, and these are ideas from Eastern philosophies like Buddhism, Hinduism.
yeah,
And I sympathize with a lot of these ideas, although I am Christian, I'm Catholic, and I believe what the church teaches. And so there's certain things that I
yeah.
can't believe that you do believe. But when it comes to the oneness and the separation, the illusion of separation, do you personally do you believe that all is one and that separation is illusion? Are you firmly committed to that, or do you think there's some nuance where maybe you have a real identity that is enduring, even though you're going to take on different forms?
Well, I think first of all, I'll say it pains me. No, don't take it personally, David, but it pains me to be put under the umbrella of New Age.
I didn't put you there. I didn't put you there. I didn't put you there. I say you
I
have
know.
something in common with that. You
Yeah,
have something in common with
yeah,
them.
yeah. Because because I think within the New Age understanding, there's so much avoidance and disconnect, right?
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot of flowery talk and chat, but without actually people actually looking at the shit and doing
yeah,
the work.
yeah,
So, but that could be another conversation.
yeah,
Um, I think I understand that the idea of an individualistic reality as individuals has its purpose. I believe that the ego is not a bad thing, that there's a purpose. The ego has its purpose, right? My identity as an individual has its purpose. To say it's absolutely disregarded completely would be to call a human experience useless, which I don't think it is. I think it has it. We're here for a reason, a very intelligent reason, right? We have a path. Um, but to me, to consider a dualistic reality in which me and you are separate is to stop at one point along the history of creation. And again, I could say, well, why are you stopping there? Why are you not going back further? Why not going right back to source when me and you actually came from the very same source? Whatever you want to call that source. And we may have then been ushered into individual realities to experience certain things. Sure. But I do believe in this, I do gravitate towards a non dualistic reality in which ultimately we have come from the same divine agency. But what that also does, it makes work you've come to do as an individual is also my work. And my work is your work. So your healing is my healing. And my healing is your healing. So, I say this all the time, and I believe that Christ would very much pointed towards the same thing. I am not willing, David, to leave anyone behind. I'm not going to do it. And saying that gets me emotional because I realize what I'm putting out into the world. But if I were to arrive at the gates of heaven and I were to look back at my brothers and sisters struggling to climb out of the fiery pits of hell, I will go and lift them out. I would like to believe that I would go back because I know their healing, it's my healing, and they are part of me. And I One of my some very close friends of my local musicians, their band is called Freetown Collective, and they say that no one can be free unless we're all free. And I believe it's so beautiful to understand that this is what it is. I really would love to believe on a spiritual level that I don't want to leave anyone behind. I know we all have our journey to walk, and we all have different perspectives and different conditioning. But I do believe ultimately we've all come from the same source. And I would like to do whatever I can to get us all back to that source.
Yeah,
You know?
I do say I am sympathetic, and there is a mystical component to Christianity. There's also mystical Islam. There's mystical
Yeah,
Judaism, and they're leaning more into the Eastern thought. Because
yeah,
there's truth everywhere, and there's truth in the East, and there's truth in the West.
yeah,
The West tends to be a little bit more heady and intellectual, and I do have dogmas of the church that I believe in, but that's not the end of the story. Those are guiding lights on the path in the darkness. But the,
yeah,
the the mystical side of religion is where it's at. And in the mystical side of Christianity or Islam or Judaism, it's that oneness, and that the ultimate
yeah.
reality of God. But there is a difference, between monism on the one side and monotheism on the other side. Like if you read Genesis 1:1,
Hmm.
in the beginning
Yeah,
was God. It wasn't the creature, it was God, and God created, and God didn't have to create. So there is a separation. There's an infinite gap between the creature and the creator. That's the difference between
yeah,
my monotheism and your monism. But I'm very sympathetic to your monism, very
yeah,
sympathetic, because for all intents and purposes, I am nothing. And this is passing, and this body is passing away. So I'm very, very
hmm,
sympathetic. But there's just that
yeah.
little that little difference between my monotheism and your monism. And
Now,
you know
so I don't know now. Now your monotheism begins that there's one ultimate God creator,
yeah,
but so do I.
yeah. But
So
the
what I
difference is
don't,
the difference is the difference is that you seem to think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to
yeah,
think that God is just sort of discovering Himself by incarnating in different forms, and that's an idea that's floated around in the East, and in Gnosticism, and in the New
yeah,
Age,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's not the Christian way, it's not the monotheistic understanding. So that's the
yeah,
difference. That's the main difference.
yeah,
And if you've
yeah,
certainly
absolutely.
you've understood, and you've looked into things like pantheism, panentheism, these sorts of things. They are, you know, they're very distinct from monotheism, because in
Yeah,
monotheism, God is transcendent, and I am not God, but I have the privilege because of what God wants for me is for me to enter into His life. So
yeah,
there is a deification that's available to us, but it's quite different from the way that you see it, I believe. And you'll
yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, but the way you see it is that it's inevitable that everyone will go back to source, right? Everyone, because there's
yeah,
nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to
yeah.
go.
Well, there's also an amazing teaching. You're right. You're right. I do believe that. Um, I do connect to that. But there's an amazing teacher, and I just referenced yoga briefly, but yoga means union, right? To join or to connect. And
Like a
somebody would
yoke,
then
like
ask,
when you're
to
yoked.
yoke, to
Yeah.
yoke, right? And then so I'll ask people, well, what are you yoking? And somebody might say, well, light and God, me and you, good and bad, whatever, right? And there's amazing teacher. I mean, all these teachers, I believe, had amazing things to bring. I won't say I don't believe in any teacher blindly, completely. And there's a teacher called Osho, who I'm sure you've
Oh
heard of.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And of course, there are a lot of questionable things surrounding Osho, especially if you watch the Netflix documentary.
yeah.
Um, but I remember reading a book once where he referenced yoga, and he pretty much says the understanding of yoga as a join in is BS. He said it's BS. It's nonsense because you can't join what was never separate. And that I really relate to that and connect to that. That it's like cells in a body is how I would look at it. Like in our individual body, we have millions of cells, Each one of those cells has a role or a purpose or a duty. If any one of those cells goes rogue and gives up its collective duty for its own personal needs and desires, it creates illness, sickness within the body. So I related very much in that way that we are all like these cells and nucleuses within this divine agency,
Do you know
created by it, of it. I don't know.
do you know personally, have you met anyone who has consciously decided to go the dark path, the left-handed path of Satanism or something, whatever they call it? The label
Yeah,
doesn't matter. The label doesn't matter. But someone who said,
yeah,
"I'm going to go the dark path of selfishness, sex, money, power, whatever it is." It might be a good-looking man in a business suit with a lot of money, or it might be
yeah,
someone in their basement doing all kinds of sick things, you know.
yeah,
But it's the same. It's the same idea. It's a conscious choice. I'm going to be selfish for selfishness' sake, and in rebellion against the good and the true and the beautiful and God and everything else, because that is an option. That is an option. And
yeah,
people
yeah,
like Aleister Crowley or different famous people like that, they made that decision. It's an adventure. It's a
yeah,
it's a rough life, and he did not die happy, by the way. But
yeah.
he had lots of excitement during his life, and he had lots of pleasure. But at what cost? For me, I would say it was possibly at the cost of his eternal soul. For you, you'd say he's just learning. He just went down a path, and it's a different experience, right? There's no real judgment from you against that sort of choice, is there?
Well, I would refrain from using the word judgment.
Okay.
But here's how I would explain it, right? Every action, word, and thought. I'm gonna sound a little new agey here for a moment. Stay with me,
It's
right?
okay.
Right. Every action, word, and thought carries a resonance and a vibration. In that everything we do impacts the world around us.
Yeah, we could say karma.
Well, karma too is a form of cause and effect that comes back to me as an individual. That's the idea of karma when people
Okay.
generally talk about it,
Okay.
right? Karma is really action. Yeah, so karma. It's the fact that every action I take creates a resonance and a vibration. Um, I can't I can't know for sure, for instance, that there's a heaven or a hell or a good place or a bad place that we go to after we die. This is an idea for me that I've heard, and for a period of my life, maybe I connected to and no longer connect to. There is one thing I know for sure, and funny enough, I had a podcast with a guy. I think his podcast says the Bible says what, and he's an atheist, and he was trying to drill me and drill me and drill me, and he was like, "How can you know that there's life after death? How can you know that you live beyond your body?" And for me, the answer to that question is very simple and it cannot be denied. It is one of the only truths that we know, that every action, word, and thought carries a resonance and vibration that impacts the world around us and impacts the people around us. It is impossible for David and Troy to get up and leave this conversation as the same people who sat down, as well as the listeners. We shift energy in the world, whether we like it or not, right? To me, every action, word, and thought is a prayer. We are filled with spirit. Everything is prayer. But most of the time, we are praying unconsciously. But can we bring more intention to where we live our lives? So, to point to answering your question, I believe that I live eternally in the resonance and vibration of my action, words, and thoughts. So I will forever live when I leave my body. I will live in the people I've interacted with. I will live in my contribution to the world. I will live in the ways I've harnessed human consciousness or evolution or nature. Ways I have contributed to that, I will live forever in that. So I will say that someone like this individual, he is now living with a negative vibration and a negative resonance in a misaligned contribution to this consciousness or this agency. Um, and in that, to me, would be his suffering. But I don't believe that I am one to impart judgment upon that. I mean, that's the teachings of Christianity that, to me, sometimes we forget. We bow judgment unto God. It's not for me to judge that, because that may have its place in his evolution, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm thinking now, I don't know if you're a fan of the Grateful Dead, but they, especially Jerry Garcia, he embodied a certain
Yeah,
sort of punk rock rebellion in its spirit. It was very freedom fighter, and
yeah,
very reckless and wild. And he had a relationship with the dark side, with the Hell's Angels and the bikers, and the criminals and stuff like that. And he was very much in a sort of non-judgment mode with the world that he moved in. And it's an interesting approach, you know. And you could argue, that it's Christ-like in some ways. I mean, I'm open to that. I'm open to the
yeah,
possibility. And Christ himself was a rebel, but he did turn the tables in the temple when the people were being selfish and greedy with their money changing in the temple. He did turn the tables, and he did wither that tree that was out of season or whatever.
yeah,
He was able to warn people for being hypocrites and these sorts of things. So there was a
yeah,
certain amount of objective judgment, and he's God incarnate, so he can
yeah,
judge
yeah,
and he will judge.
yeah,
Okay. But
yeah,
there's a fine line between sort of a secular form of rebellion and freedom, that we see a lot in popular culture, and especially in music. For example, I keep referencing punk, the punk movement. It
yeah,
used to be about that sort of breaking away
yeah,
from barriers and norms and these sorts of things. And there's a component to that, I think, which is good and healthy, if it's
yes,
if it's if it's in the proper place, in the proper proportion. But yeah, for you, I sense a certain approach which has both good and bad. And bad from my perspective in terms of missing the boat with well, like what my shirt says, repentance, right? Like, I mean, what is
yeah,
the ultimate, what is the danger in this life? For me, the danger
yeah,
is choosing not to love, and choosing not to reciprocate the love of God, and then paying the ultimate price for that.
yeah,
And some of my recent guests think that we can do whatever we want. It's just an exploration, and we're just learning, and we should be good for
yeah,
goodness' sake. You said something very nice. You said you should be good for goodness' sake, because that's what's healthy. That's what's in
yeah.
alignment, and that's
God
what's,
lives in everything. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So
but just to be, not to cut you, but just to be clear, David, that is not what I'm saying. Yeah.
okay.
So I don't want to be understood. So misunderstood, sorry. So what I would like to point to is, because I'm very much about flipping the temple over and turning the tables and drawing boundaries and being like, yo, this is misalignment.
Okay, okay, okay,
This
okay,
is self-serving. I
okay.
am no way am I anything goes.
Smiling on evil. Oh,
No way. I draw very clear boundaries about what serves the people
okay,
energetically and
okay,
otherwise,
okay,
and what serves the greater collective.
okay.
So in no way am I fulfill your needs and desires and pleasures as much as
Uh-huh.
you want. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
matter. In no way. I'm sorry if I
Mm.
came across that
No,
way.
no, no.
Yeah. I believe very much in what you're saying, that we have to draw boundaries. We have to point in the direction of what it means to contribute to the collective in a positive way. So I guess what a reason I hesitate to use words judgment is because I would judge someone's actions, words, and thoughts far quicker than I would judge the soul or spirit or seed of God that embodies that.
Yeah, we say don't judge the heart. This is what we say in Christianity. We could
Yeah,
judge it. We could judge, like, if you put your baby in the microwave, I'm going to judge
yeah,
that. That's objectively evil. I don't know why you did it.
yeah,
I
Yeah,
can't read your heart, okay? But don't put your baby in the mic. Don't put your cat in the microwave for that matter,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And we're not allowed to hate a blade of grass or a grain of sand. We can't hate any part of the creation. So, you know,
yeah,
love is a necessary thing too. We have to love God and His creation, every part of His
yeah,
creation, and everything. If you point to you know, some disgusting part of our world, whatever it is, uh it's good, it's ontologically good, it's just maybe out of alignment, like you say, you know,
yeah.
it's out of joint, you know. My friend, I want to give a shout out to a couple of friends in the live chat, Zlatan and Daniel Drazinovich. He has a quick question for you, and we'll wrap
Yeah.
it up, okay, because it's been
I
an
didn't
hour.
realize we were live, David.
We're live.
Wicked.
We're live.
Oh,
Yeah,
wicked.
yeah.
All right, let's go.
We're
Let's go.
alive. We're alive.
All right,
Yeah. So,
let's go. Sure.
what is the definition of good, and what is the definition of bad or evil? What is good? What is evil? How would you define those
Oh,
terms? Very
good
simply.
question. If I had to,
Yeah.
I would say something that is good is something that positively influences the world around us and people around us. Something that is in service to a greater collective, right? Something that could be deemed bad is something that only, and I'll explain the word only serves our individual needs, desires, and wants. And the reason I stress the word only is because, you know, in the new age, there's this amazing term called self love that we love.
Uh-huh.
Well, self love is important because we have to love and take care of ourselves and our what we need so that we can love something greater and serve something greater than ourselves. But if that self love doesn't prepare us to actually do a work and serve something greater than ourselves, well, then it's just selfish, you know. Um, so that would be my answer to that is we have to look at what is our intentions of these actions and what is it serving. In my book, I propose the question, what is being loved? I propose that love always exists, but we have to ask what is being loved. Is it a love of money, a love of power, a love of greed, a love of pleasure, a love of desire? Or is it a love of someone else? Is it the love of God that lives within everything around us? Um, is it the love of service? But we could really ask question in this moment, in this action, what is being loved? You know?
So, we're gonna wrap it up here. I really appreciate meeting you, and I love you. I'll say that,
Yeah,
and
I love you too, brother.
because you're a brother, you know. And is troyhadeed.com, is that somewhere where people could buy your book and see your what you're up to?
They could definitely find me there. They could buy my book on Amazon. It's called My Name is Love.
And do you
Yeah.
sell the shirt? What does the shirt say you're wearing? What does your shirt say?
This shirt is a friend gave me this. It says,
Lift yourself up a little bit so we can read. Okay, here we go.
I can't read backwards, but you can
Love
read.
is not what you do, love is what you are. And who is the quote by there? Sadagoku?
Yes, Sadhguru. A friend gave me that. Sadhguru is
Sadguru.
yeah, he's alive today.
Okay.
But if I had to share a quote with you, David, really
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
I'll share one with you, and the author to me is unknown. And I'm sure you could appreciate this. I have it on my arm, which is why I'm watching my arm to read it. It says, I have not come to teach, I have come to love, and love will teach. And I think that's so powerful. But as I share that, I must identify that we always think of love as flowers and rainbows and pretty, cuddly butterflies. But love is also fierce and courageous, and love is also fire and brimstone. So it's also about the intention behind our love. Like love is drawing boundaries, love is saying no, love is walking away. Love is condemning someone's actions, words, and thoughts, even though you might lose them in the process. You know, all these things are elements and visions of love.
Yeah, the surgeon's scalpel will slice open your chest or your head in order to
Yeah,
do a greater good and to help you put things
yeah,
back in order. And it's got to, well, I mean, we look to Christ and we see that love is self-sacrifice, it's pain, it's suffering, it's agony, and it's a spiritual, emotional turmoil because we want what's best for our fellow man, and
Yeah.
it's not easy. And if you're in a committed relationship, a romantic relationship, you understand also what it is to serve, and
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, but it's not always pretty, and it's not always fun or relaxing or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah. So I hope you come back. In 2024, you can come back. We'll chat some more because it's just the time
Yeah.
flew by. The hour went by so quick. But
Yeah. I would love to anytime. Anytime. That's what beautiful, David. Thank you for having me.
thank you. God bless you. I'm
And
gonna be I'm gonna be praying
thank
for
you.
you and yours. I hope that you'll
Same.
send some prayers my way. Okay.
Absolutely. Will do.
God
All
bless you,
right.
my brother.
Love. You too, brother.
Much
Love.
love.
Bless.
Bye bye.